Our first story today comes from a young woman who discovered that the quiet solitude of her apartment could be shattered in the most terrifying way imaginable. I treasure my independence, so living alone has always felt like a perfect fit for me. The freedom to exist on my own schedule, in my own space, is something I deeply value. I work from home, which means my internal clock is a bit strange. I'm a night owl, often staying up until 4 or 5 in the morning and waking up around noon. This particular night, about a week ago, was no different. It was around 11 p.m., and I was in the kitchen making myself a late dinner, simple spaghetti. As the water boiled, I heard a faint knocking. It seemed to be coming from my neighbor's door, so while it was a little odd for that time of night, I dismissed it. A few minutes later, the sound came again. This time it was sharper, and it felt closer, as if it was meant for my door. A little unnerved, I silenced my music and walked to the front door, peering through the peephole. The hallway was empty. There was absolutely no one there. I shrugged it off and went back to my dinner. After eating, I settled on the couch for a little while before deciding to take a shower. I was only in there for a few minutes when I heard a loud clatter from somewhere in the apartment. My first thought was my two cats. They are energetic and frequently chase each other around, sometimes knocking things over in their games. I told myself it was just them being a little more rambunctious than usual and continued my shower. But then, as I was rinsing the shampoo from my hair, I heard a voice. It was not the muffled sound of my neighbors through the thin walls. This was different. It was clear, a low murmur that sounded like it was coming from my own living room. My blood ran cold. I immediately shut off the water, straining to listen. I couldn't understand the words, but there was no longer any doubt in my mind. Someone else was in my apartment. Then a horrifying realization hit me. I had a bad habit of forgetting to lock my sliding glass door. Living on the first floor, it was an easy point of entry. I stood frozen in the bathroom for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes. I waited for silence, hoping desperately that whoever it was would just leave. But the silence that followed was even more terrifying. I knew I had to act. My phone was in my bedroom, but a weapon was in the kitchen. I'm not a large person, a 19-year-old girl who barely weighs 120 pounds. I knew that if I had to defend myself against an adult man, I would need an advantage. The knife was my best option. Taking a deep breath, I burst out of the bathroom and sprinted to the kitchen, grabbing the largest chef's knife from the block. With the handle gripped tightly in my hand, I peeked around the corner into my living room. It was empty, but my sliding glass door was standing wide open, the curtain fluttering in the night breeze. I ran to the door, slammed it shut, and immediately locked it, securing the blinds as well. My heart was pounding as I methodically searched every corner of my apartment, checking closets, under the bed, behind the shower curtain again. I searched everywhere multiple times. There was no one, nothing was taken, no items were out of place. But that fact offered zero comfort. I called the police to report a break-in, but the response was underwhelming. A single officer arrived, took a brief statement, and offered little in the way of reassurance. He made it clear that with no suspect and nothing stolen, there was not much they could do. I felt completely dismissed. After he left, I tried calling my mom, my sister, and a couple of friends, but it was late and no one picked up. I laid in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling and praying the intruder wouldn't return. In a panic, I texted my sister, emergency in all capital letters. She called back instantly, and I shakily recounted everything that had happened. She offered to let me come over, but I was too terrified to leave my apartment, convinced he might be waiting outside. I asked if she could just stay on the phone with me for a while, and she agreed. After we hung up, the silence in my apartment felt heavy and threatening. My intuition screamed that it wasn't over, and I was right. A short while later, I heard it, a soft, light tapping sound on the glass of my sliding door. It was 2 in the morning. This couldn't be a friend. I immediately dialed the police again, explaining that the person had come back. Thankfully, the station is less than a mile away, and 2 officers were there within minutes. They thoroughly searched the area outside my apartment, but found no trace of anyone. They left, and once again I was alone with no answers. I couldn't bring myself to sleep, so I stayed awake until the first light of dawn. As soon as the sun was up, I called my sister and told her I was coming over, needing to escape the place that no longer felt like a home. The next day, my father came over and we installed security cameras covering every angle outside and inside my apartment. It has been weeks now, and there have been no more incidents. My lease is up in a month, and I am counting down the days until I can move. I don't know who that person was or what they wanted, but the experience has left me with a deep and persistent fear of being alone. Home is supposed to be your sanctuary, but for me, that feeling of safety has been stolen. That loss of security in one's own home is a terrifying theme, and it continues in our next story, where a young man house sitting for his grandparents found himself in a life threatening situation. Every winter, my grandparents escape the cold and head south to Florida. They started doing this after they retired. The very first year they were gone, their house was broken into. The thieves were thorough, stealing over $50,000 worth of electronics, jewelry, and art. They were never caught. Because of that, my grandparents now have a state-of-the-art security system, a Ring camera, and a locked gate at the end of their long driveway. The entire property is fenced in. They live in a beautiful house in an affluent area where some of their neighbors are actual millionaires. This kind of neighborhood naturally attracts the wrong kind of attention. The houses are also spread far apart, with maybe only 3 or 4 homes within a quarter-mile radius. It's quiet, which is nice, but it also means there are fewer eyes and ears around to notice suspicious activity. That's why they have me house sit. The pay is great, and I basically get this incredible house all to myself. They have a bar in the basement, a huge home theater, a pool, and a hot tub. Their property is over 8 acres, so I always bring my hunting gear with me. I enjoy hunting, and having my rifle provides a sense of security, knowing I have protection if someone ever tried to break in again. Most nights I have friends over to keep the anxiety at bay. But on this particular night, I was by myself. I don't recall exactly what I was doing, but the peaceful quiet was suddenly shattered by the piercing shriek of the security alarm. The system is set up with sensors on the front door, the back door, and the garage. The alarm only sounds if one of those doors is opened. That could only mean one thing: someone was inside the house. My first instinct was to call my mom. I don't know why, she was just the first person I thought of. As the phone rang, a thought struck me. My mom was the only other person I knew who had a spare key. When she answered, groggy with sleep, I immediately asked her if she was at the house. She said she was in bed and asked me to stop messing around. I insisted, telling her the alarm was going off. She thought I was playing a prank on her, told me to go to bed, and hung up. My heart hammered against my ribs. I crept out of the bedroom and peered over the railing of the staircase down into the living room. Below me, I could see a dark shape, a man's outline, moving deliberately near the couch. It looked like he was searching for something. I immediately called my mom back, my voice trembling. I told her I was not joking, that I could see someone in the living room, and that I was terrified. The tone in my voice must have finally convinced her. She confirmed that it wasn't her or my dad, and that nobody was supposed to be there. She told me in a firm voice to get out of the house immediately. I waited, my body hidden in the shadows of the upstairs hallway, until I saw the figure move into another room. Then my survival instinct took over. I flew down the stairs, yanked open the front door, and ran as fast as I could down the long dirt driveway. I didn't stop until I reached the road, where I dove into a large cornfield and hid among the stalks. I stayed on the phone with my mom while my dad called the police. My parents arrived in less than 15 minutes, their headlights cutting through the darkness. I'm incredibly thankful that the intruder never saw me. When my grandparents returned from their trip, my grandpa noticed a few things were missing: a watch, a pair of expensive shoes, and some other clothing. It seemed like the burglar got spooked by the alarm and left before he could find anything of significant value. The entire situation was a harsh lesson for my family. We had a long history of playing pranks on each other, sometimes taking them too far. That night taught us the danger of crying wolf. My mom's initial disbelief could have cost me dearly. The thought of what could have happened if I hadn't been able to convince her still keeps me up at night. While our last storyteller chose to flee, the person in our final account made a very different and much riskier decision when faced with a home invader. This happened back in the spring of 2018. I was the type of guy who was out with friends almost every single weekend, either at a bar or a house party. On this particular Saturday, however, I decided to stay in. I was recovering from a pretty rough hangover from the night before. At the time, I lived with my girlfriend, Jessica. She worked the third shift, typically from 11 at night until 7 or 8 in the morning. Her car was out of commission, so for a few months I was her designated driver, dropping her off and picking her up from work. That night, after I dropped her off and returned home, I immediately knew something was wrong. There was an unfamiliar car parked in my driveway. Then I saw that my house was completely dark. I always leave the porch light on, and I was sure I had left the lamp on in the living room. It was now close to midnight. Against my better judgment, I got out of my car and walked up to the front porch. As I got closer, I saw the front door was slightly ajar. My anxiety spiked. I peeked through the front window, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. Then I saw it, the distinct beam of a flashlight, moving around inside my house. My brain screamed at me to get back in my car and call the police, but a surge of anger and protectiveness washed over me. This was my home. I crept closer to the door, listening intently. I could hear footsteps, but no voices. In that moment, I made the conscious choice to confront whoever was inside. I slowly pushed the door open, its hinges letting out a loud creak. Standing in my living room was a man dressed head to toe in black, his face obscured by a strange mask. "Hey, get the hell out of my house!" I yelled, my voice filled with more confidence than I felt. I started cursing at him, and he charged. He threw a series of wild punches, but adrenaline had sharpened my reflexes, and he missed every single one. I managed to grab his arm, twist him around, and get him into a full Nelson chokehold. As I held him, a part of my mind frantically hoped that he was alone. I held the chokehold until I was certain he was unconscious, then carefully lowered him to the floor. I did a quick, frantic search of the house to make sure there were no other intruders, constantly glancing back at the man on my floor. I wanted to be ready the moment he started to stir. He was significantly smaller than me, which made controlling the situation much easier. I kept a close watch on him while I waited for the police to arrive, which felt like an eternity. When they finally got there, they took him into custody. He was charged with a list of offenses, including attempted armed robbery, aggravated assault, and breaking and entering. He's in prison now, and I can't say I feel any sympathy for him. His life is wasting away because of one terrible decision. I can only hope that when he eventually gets out, he is a changed man. I often think about what might have happened if Jessica had been home alone that night. The thought still fills me with a cold dread, and it reinforces my belief that I would do absolutely anything to protect the people I love.